Hello, and thank you for joining us on Hello Mayor. I'm City of Las Vegas Mayor Carolyn Goodman, and today we're diving into a topic that's received a lot of attention over the past year. The pockets of county islands, located primarily in the northwest part of the city, have undergone some intense scrutiny. These are portions of the county completely surrounded by the city. The main question is, which jurisdiction should be providing the services to these specific areas and who should be paying for it? It's a confusing topic that we hope to clear up for you today. A little bit later, we'll be talking with the City Manager, Betsy Fretwell, and County Commissioner Marilyn Kirkpatrick on this issue. But first, I want to introduce our city's Planning Director, Tom Perigo, is going to give us some background on the area. So good morning, and how are you, Tom? So nice to see you. I should call you Mr. Perigo.
Good morning, Mayor.
One of the first things is, we have a very wide audience of different ages, and so I really love to talk to people first about their background and how did they get into the city work or to the particular job they're on. So where were you born and raised, and what's your background?
Oh, well, I was born in Wisconsin, a small town, Hudson, on the St. Croix River, where my mother was born and grew up. But I actually grew up across the river in Minneapolis until about the 6th grade. And then our family moved to Colorado, Summit County, about 100 miles west of Denver.
Wow.
So a lot of years spent in the Rocky Mountains, and it was fantastic.
Minneapolis, I think, was the one that took our franchise, our soccer franchise team. We were down to the last three hopefuls. So, but I'm sure you're glad you live out in our area now. So how about your educational background? Where'd you go to college? What'd you study?
I received my undergraduate degree from the University of Northern Colorado in business administration with an emphasis in finance and computer information systems as a minor.
Oh my
I went to
goodness.
work for a resort in Colorado, Crested Butte Mountain Resort, for a few years, and then moved to Las Vegas to pursue a master's degree in hotel administration, UNLV having one of the best schools in the country. However, when I got here, for whatever reason, I'm not quite sure, I ended up working on a master's degree in economics, and so I received my master's in economics from UNLV.
Well, that's really interesting because how I first knew of you and what your specialty area was, which became planning, was I was seated at a UNLV luncheon and sat next to a Dr. Roy Smith, you were a student, I believe, and he was very much into sustainability and preserving the earth, and he said you were one of his best students. And we had just were notified that we, the city of Las Vegas, of all the cities across the country, had won the climate award from the U.S. Conference of Mayors. So what were you doing in environmental studies?
Well, that's very interesting. So my focus in my master's program was regional economics. So I studied the growth and change of the city, which became a really great background for when I came to work for the city. But once I was with the city, I did start pursuing additional graduate coursework in environmental science and ethics and policy studies. So I was at one time thinking of going for a PhD. But I just continued my graduate studies, never quite took that next step.
See, but that's so fascinating to me because I know you were the one that really was the impetus about Green Chips, which is an environmental sharing with the entire community and the hotels and getting them more sensitive. So my first knowledge when I took the mayorship in 2011 was you were the go-to guy for anything to do with the environment, and everybody looked at you. What department were you in at that time?
At that time, I was in the planning department. I was deputy director of planning, and that was back in about 2005. And that's when your husband, our former mayor, signed on to the U.S. Conference of Mayors Climate Protection Agreement, one of the first mayors in the entire country to do so. Now, thousands of mayors have signed on, but that really launched our sustainability program. And Betsy Fretwell had asked me to work on that new initiative to create a sustainable city.
And so there we were getting this wonderful award because of that effort. I know Green Chips, my husband, because it was the initial year, was made president, and forever he would come home and he'd say, what's green chips? What's green chips? And I only could think of cows. So I had no idea when I became mayor what this was. But anyway, today we're on to, I mean, we're so glad, and you became the director of planning. How many years ago? Has it been 3 now?
It's going on, yes, 3rd year.
So, and you're doing a fabulous job, which means then anybody coming in to do any type of building, planning, whatever, it comes through you in your department.
Well, that's right, but planning has quite a few responsibilities, from business licensing, license enforcement, code enforcement, zoning, long-range planning, historic preservation, and sustainability.
So it's a multi-hat job that you hold.
Absolutely.
So, you know, Oscar and I came here in 1964, and there were less than 100,000 people, and I think everything was dirt road from Flamingo south, from Decatur west. Certainly there was not much north of, I can't even remember, probably Washington. Or Lake Mead, out in that area. And so here we are years later, and talking about how did we get into this issue of city and county pocket islands. Could you, the city I know is 135 square miles, has a very definitive border to it. And then the county, there are other municipalities certainly in the county, Henderson, Boulder City, but there is the unincorporated area too. So can you walk us a little bit through the history of how did and when did this all begin?
Well, if you go back to the formation of our city back in 1911, we were a city of just under 20 square miles. I don't know that anybody anticipated the kind of growth we'd see since then over the last 100 years. But today, we have expanded our city boundaries, and I have an update for you on that 135 square mile number. We're closer to 150 square miles. We just had a very large annexation that expanded us by another 8 square miles, and since 135, we've added other areas through annexation.
Now, that property that we added and voted upon at City Council, was that Bureau of Land Management land that we added in? Was that taking land from the county? What was that we did?
That was about 4,500 acres of BLM land. What happened with the lands bill that Congress passed expanded the disposal boundary, and part of the idea was to make sure that we knew what areas were available for future growth, because essentially the city is landlocked. We have other incorporated cities on our borders, we have protected federal lands on our borders, but there was sort of this no man's land between the city limits and, for example, Red Rock National Conservation Area, or city limits and the Desert Wildlife Refuge, the Sheep Mountains. So what this bill did was expand the disposal boundary and create an opportunity for now those lands all to be decided. Some lands went into the National Conservation Area, some lands have now been annexed to the city, but now we have clearly defined borders and we know what those limits are, and we can plan for growth and conservation of lands appropriately.
Now, can one go up on our website for the city and see that demarcation of what's what and what's been added in, or is that not possible?
Absolutely. I believe I checked last weekend, and all of the, well, maybe not all because I didn't look at every single map, but the maps are updated to show the limits of our city.
Oh, I think we're actually showing that right now.
Yes,
And,
so you can see to the northwest, that spine along the 95. That's part of the area that was recently annexed. And it's not quite as easy to tell, but to the west, now the city borders with the Red Rock Canyon National Conservation Area.
So that would be the non-colored area. What is the little white area, if one can see that, next to the other colored area?
That's the annexation you mentioned a minute ago that we recently adopted through City Council. That's that 4,500 acres.
So that would take us to the
BLM
150
land.
plus.
That takes us to just about 150 square miles. And so, the annexation is pretty much the typical way that cities grow and accommodate land development. Because obviously it's the city that provides those basic resources, infrastructure,
Such as, what are we
roads,
talking about?
Parks, streetlights, traffic signals, sewer, maintenance of all those facilities. So that's the stuff that the city provides. we're kind of a unique situation here where the county, because of the way that this valley built out, the county also provides those kinds of services. And there are other areas where the city and the county sort of share that, or it's a city-county joint government. We're not a joint government, obviously, but the county does have urban areas and provides those same kind of services and facilities that are typically provided by a municipality.
Now, with the county, and I know we're going to have our wonderful county commissioner, Kirkpatrick, on in the next segment, so of course to ask her. You know, my biggest concern is how many areas are there within the city confines, and then the infrastructure's already been in place because we've put it there. What are the areas and the issues that this deliberation has been going on about? Is it about the service of the lighting, the sidewalk upkeep, the street maintenance, or is the street, let's start with the streets, are the streets separate from county responsibility or the county island responsibilities?
So that's a really excellent question. As the city grew and land was developed in the Northwest, for example, just since 2000, we've added about 30 square miles and 200,000 people in population.
Wow.
But some of those areas were already developed where they didn't necessarily need city services. They had septic and wells and that sort of stuff. So they stayed as county areas and were not annexed to the city. Over time, a lot of that area, though, is asking to develop at a little bit of a higher density where they do need some of those services. And so it creates this kind of a weird situation where the city provides some services, the county provides some services, and it's been a bit of a challenge to sort that out. Over the last 10 or 15 years, we've had various agreements to try to figure that out, joint planning for parks and infrastructure and land use, to make sure that together the county and the city are building the best community we can for the folks who live there. And so today now we have the latest version of an agreement on who provides what services. And I know you're going to get into that in more detail in your next segment.
What I'm hearing, and maybe I'm wrong, is the fact that the county was already established in areas and then the city grew to surround those areas.
That's right.
It was we, the city representing the city, started to expand and grow, went out further and further. We're talking about the Northwest. And those islands were part of a larger area of the county originally?
Well, there's just, people sort of went out and developed their property, and some of it's more like small ranches or small agriculture areas, or just people who wanted a very rural lifestyle. But even those areas started to fill in and become a little bit more populated, again, requiring another level of service from either the county or the city. And that's sort of the challenge. Who best to provide those services? Who pays for them? And again, that's the stuff that's been worked out in this interlocal. So we think we have a very good path forward, again, to make sure that whether you're a city resident, a county resident, you have the highest standard of living, the best quality of life, and the best public service. And between the county and the city, we are absolutely going to provide that.
Well, it's important to all of us. I know when we came here, we were living in the southeast part of town. At that time, more of the rural, not so much the sidewalks and the lighting, exactly what's happening in the Northwest. Now, I don't know, because that is county out there, how this came to be that at the time the city began to grow, it didn't just take all that into the city. Was that before your time then?
Well, you have to remember the city doesn't typically go out and just annex property. For the most part, it's a request from the property owner. Somebody will buy a piece of property and they'll want to develop it. Again, to accommodate that growth we talked about, 200,000 people since 2000, and that's that's a huge amount of growth and development. But they'll come to the city and say, I would like to annex to the city so that I can develop this property.
So I want to get your water and your sewer.
Well, it's the Las Vegas Valley Water District serves all of the folks, but yes, I want to get your sewer, I want to get my land use entitlements and all that sort of stuff. So they'll come to the city, ask to annex so they can go forward and develop their property. Mostly it's around sewer because the Clark County Water Reclamation District really didn't have the resources to provide sewer service up in the Northwest without making large infrastructure investments. So again, that's been one of the big challenges is figuring out how to provide that service. The city has provided some, and we'll continue to do so now under this new agreement.
So what we're really addressing here is in those islands, somebody who lives in the center of one of the county islands couldn't say, you know, I'm not going to go ahead and dig out further into my septic tank or dig my well deeper. I want to go ahead and get on the water and I want to get on the city sewer. If they were in fact living in the heart of one of those islands, they could not do that. They would have to wait till that process moved in towards wherever they were living, correct?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Unless you are adjacent to the city, your property touches city boundary, and there's rules about how much and all that. But unless you're touching city boundaries, you couldn't annex in to receive service. So what we did for many years is we had an agreement that once we will provide you sewer service, but once you're eligible to annex, once you're next to the city, then you will annex to the city, and that way you're part of our service district. Again, this interlocal helps resolve all of that.
You know, it's part of the growth and development of the community because down there off of Eastern and what was Flamingo, I mean, it is Flamingo, that's exactly what had happened there. We got off the well, we got off the sewer, off our septic tank and hooked up. So I certainly understand it. It's part of the development, but I do know out, particularly in the Northwest, the more ranchette type lifestyle, no lights, no street lights, no sidewalks. It really is a passion of the people who live in there to sustain that quality of life. And how fortunate for those who feel differently that they can go around it, but this can remain in its purest sense, what the lifestyle they want, rather than being gobbled up by development.
And I think most people in their heart really enjoy and like that rural area within our city. It really sort of harkens back to the Old West and the kind of lifestyle that we either romanticize or we like to know is in our city or in our area in the West. And so yes, I think together we all have to do everything we can to create that opportunity for folks who want to live that kind of lifestyle and still enjoy all of the great amenities of living in a world-class city.
Well, if you have further questions, you call the planning department about this, and Tom Perigo, who's done a wonderful job for us. And we are going to move on. We're going to have our County Commissioner, Marilyn Kirkpatrick, interesting background there, and our fabulous Betsy Fretwell, who's our city manager. But Tom, you've been just great. It's so exciting, and it's so wonderful working with you because, see that smile? It's always just like that. Every single day, and he's just wonderful to work with, so knowledgeable and so caring about our community. So thank you for being on. Hope you'll be back on sometime soon again.
Thank you, Mayor. It's a pleasure and an honor.
Don't worry, 74 people were picked before me in the NFL draft.
To fight childhood obesity, United Way and the NFL are helping kids play at least 60 minutes a day.
Okay, time for the team obstacle course. Yay!
What this place needs is more healthy kids. To get involved or donate, go to unitedway.org/play60.
Now I get it.
Welcome back. As I mentioned earlier, the county islands we see throughout the city have been a big point of discussion in recent months between the city and the county. So who better to talk with about the tireless efforts to come to a compromise than our wonderful city manager, Betsy Fretwell, and our wonderful commissioner, Marilyn Kirkpatrick. So welcome to you both. We're so delighted you've come here. And I'm going to start with you, Ms. Fretwell, Betsy. Tell us a little bit, and I want the audience to know this. I mean, she has been in so many different jobs, not because she couldn't hold the job, but really that has prepared her so well to take over the reins at the city. So tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I came out here in '91, right when things were really going gangbusters.
Of
And,
course.
We
For
had
what? A job?
Yep, I
Which
did.
one?
I came right out of graduate school. I came as an intern in the Clark County Manager's office
Oh,
and made my way up through the organization for several years, and then had a unique opportunity to move over to the City of Henderson as their first government relations director. I worked there with them, with their city council and their city manager at the time for a few years, and then Virginia.
wait 1 second. Excuse me. Were you lobbying then at the legislature or not?
Yes, I had started lobbying the legislature when I was at Clark County, and did that for several years.
Okay.
Did that as well when I went to the City of Henderson, obviously. And then after I left the City of Henderson, I joined the city, and I've been here for 16
here
years.
city.
Yes.
And I know you have a graduate degree in what? From where?
University of Georgia Public Administration.
Go
Yes.
Bulldogs, right?
Exactly.
A real fan.
Yeah.
Oh, so we're going to get back and get it really into this, but we're so delighted you're here, Commissioner, and know your history in this town is a lengthy one. So tell us a little bit about you. I look at you and I always just see you up in Carson, and so tell us about yourself.
It's nice to be home today. It's pretty wet up there, so I'm kind of excited about that. I went to Vegas Verdes Elementary, then I went to Cashman, and Brindley was a brand new school
gosh.
when we were out in the Northwest. Then I went to Western High School. So I've lived predominantly in the West, and today I've lived in my house in North Las Vegas for 25 years.
Oh
And I
my
used to be
gosh.
the last house, and now I'm right in the center of all of it. So I was fortunate enough to be in PTA, which is, the mad moms getting work done. That led me to the North Las Vegas Planning Commission, and I had 6 amazing sessions
Wow.
in the legislature.
Who was mayor at that time?
C-Strand was.
Okay, and so
C-Strand.
you did 6 years there.
I did 4 at
Okay.
the North Las Vegas Planning Commission, and I really liked it. There was an opportunity. The assembly seat was open, and I thought, why not do more? I had a great legislative time and making a big difference. I went from just an everyday freshman to the chairman of government affairs, which I served for 4 years, and then
You were
this-
tough, let me tell you. You
I
were
was tough on local government.
Yes,
and,
you were.
I'm sure they're going to pay me back.
Yeah, no. But what committees were you assigned as a freshman?
As a freshman, I had natural resources.
Oh.
What I asked for was education and local government, because those were the things that were important to me. What I got was local government, natural resources,
Oh, you
and
got one.
commerce and labor. At the time, it was infrastructure and planning, and I thought, oh my goodness, it's all about planning, and it really was about property taxes. So that was interesting. But I worked behind the scenes. I learned from my mentors and
who
how
were
to get
they?
things done. So Chris G, she was tough. You had to read the statute, know it inside and out. But I was successful in getting 7 bills passed my very first session.
Isn't that phenomenal? And how many terms did you do?
I did 6.
So termed out,
Termed out.
but ending up a speaker
Yes, so I did the speaker and then the minority leader.
as well, yes.
So,
And so I do remember coming in front of you on that film tax credit that
Yep.
we worked so hard. And the city was so excited to get you on board. And you said you can have 4 years, but it's a pilot program and you better make sure it works. And so
Yeah.
unfortunately
And it-
we lost it.
But we did see a lot of work that was done, so we lost a portion of it. But now there's 2 bills in the legislature, and I believe the governor actually put it in his budget to put some of it back.
Oh,
So
wouldn't
that's
that be
exciting.
wonderful? Because we know, being so close and being such a wonderful locale for movies, we find that even in China, they replicate Las Vegas to do a story about Las Vegas, and it is all about credits and giving the film companies the tax credit. So we thank you for that. And so we have to start our 4 years over again.
That's right.
So now, one of the things, and I don't know, Betsy, since you came in 91, which is the year our youngest child graduated from high school, and so it's emblazoned here, but since you've lived here for quite some time, what happened? I remember my husband always telling me how stupid of the city not to take advantage of the fact that the entire southern Nevada area could be the city of Las Vegas, which is why nobody knows where they live because it says Las Vegas on your postal address. When was that? We came during the days of Orrin and Bonnie Gregson in '64. When was this opportunity there, and why didn't it happen?
At least what I remember is it was in the late 70s when they started having that discussion. And
Wow.
maybe if you remember, and it dates me how long I've been here, but Tonopah Highway
Yes.
was just a highway, right? It was
Yes.
a 2-lane highway in the middle of nowhere.
Oh.
Headed to Reno. So that's when a lot of the discussion happened. What would happen? Rancho didn't even go past Alta.
Right.
It's kind of where it stopped. North Las Vegas Airport was out there in the middle of nowhere.
Boonies. And Bob Taylor's ranch house.
Yep,
Further out.
absolutely. And,
Yes.
and the Silk Purse, right?
Yeah, the Self-Purse Ranch, of course.
So there's a lot of, and Gilcrease, when I was a kid, you
Far
followed the
out.
tree line.
Yes.
And today, it's hard to even notice
Isn't
that tree
that
line.
amazing?
So
So
I
what
think-
happened? Was there a county body at that time, a group of commissioners, or was it just the city was at a point to work with legislators? How did this come about that we are where
Well, at
we
least what I remember is there was a little bit of contention on territory and turf, right? We have
Right.
that every day, even today, whether it be the states, local government, or local governments within local governments. But I just don't think that anybody foreseen the growth that was going to happen. Because if you lived way out, Frank Hawkins was the city councilman when Decatur started developing, right?
Right.
Just on the other side of Craig
Right.
Road. So I just don't think that anybody ever imagined that we would grow that big.
And so the city council made a determination they weren't going to pop for the infrastructure and everything else. So
Right.
at that point, how was the county, was that already in place, the governing body of the county, or was there at that time in the late 70s a creation of a separate body by the legislature?
I don't know
We're gonna
that.
have to find that
yeah,
out.
I mean, it would be great to go back and see that history. But what I can tell you is the county already had many rural areas out in the northwest. So and most of them were on the wells and septics. And
And
so,
I know very much like the southeast because we were already out there,
Uh-huh.
and we were on wells and septic tank. I hopefully will be able to show a map. What district is your district, and does it have a number?
So I represent District B,
B.
which is about 375,000 constituents.
Wow,
From
and growing all the
and
time.
Every day we're growing from, Lake Mead and Nellis area, all the way out to Mesquite, all the way across North Las Vegas, and up the 95 up to Cold Creek.
Huge area, and what does that overlay, Betsy, for us as far as the wards?
Primarily Ward 6, although that picks up parts of Ward 5, maybe even some of 3.
of 3,
Do you have any
right.
of 1? I don't think you have any of 1.
So that would be Councilman Ross in
Right,
Ward
the Northwest, Ward
in
6.
Ward 6, and then Councilman
Councilman
Barlow,
Barlow.
5, and 3 a little bit of Councilman Coffin.
Right, right.
And then, of course, all unincorporated
Right.
going out to Mesquite.
And
Right.
North Las Vegas. She has North Las Vegas.
And you have North.
And I actually have 15 legislators that overlap within District B as well.
I'm exhausted
So-
from all
but
this.
it's
so
really
you're out and about.
confusing, right, for
Yeah,
folks?
but you have grown through it all, so there's a sense here. I do remember council meetings, and Bets, I'm going to ask you to speak to this. In the beginning, what caused the first initial thought about annexation into these pockets of county islands. There's one in particular I'm thinking of that's in Ward 1, actually, with Councilwoman Tarkanian at Oakey and Jones, right in there, because there's a wonderful garden out there that was established. And I remember they had planted a little plant box for me and one for Councilwoman. And I said something about, well, I'm so glad you're contributing to the property tax to the city, at which point I was told, no, we're not. We're in the county. I said, you can't be in the county. You're in the heart of the city. So if you could address that just a little bit first, please, Betsy.
The whole reason for annexation is really to provide consistent municipal services,
Like,
and to handle the impacts
even though
of growth.
Tom said them, I mean, would you
Right.
repeat them, because we may have
Well,
some new
everything.
viewers.
Well, we do everything from animal control to zoning, and everything in between. A to Z is the way I describe it. But it's everything from code enforcement to providing municipal public safety services, and a whole host of other things. Planning, consistent planning practices.
I'm going to
et
ask you to
cetera,
go
et cetera.
back to that, but that's something that our viewers always call up about. I have somebody that's been tagging our walls or
Right.
leaves garbage here. So in an island, and I'm thinking of the little tiny one right there at Oakey
Right.
and Jones, they would call the city and say, come get rid of this tagging or get rid of. Would, in that instance, the city respond, or would our planning department in code enforcement refer then to the county? It's
We
a
would
small
refer it.
piece. You
We would refer
refer
it. And that's one of the things I think is kind of a delicate balance, and I know the commissioner and I had several conversations about this. It's like making sure that we're making the most efficient use of each of our very important resources, and trying to create the most efficient level of service that we can. You know, it's interesting when you look at some of these development patterns through the city's history. There were some expansion issues into the area that's now the famed Las Vegas Strip, where the county provided services for whatever reason the city did not. There was a whole host of regional consolidations that happened around the same time, where the water district, for instance, was created that is a joint service provider. Metro was created as a joint service provider for both the city and the county areas of urban development. And what happened is the county really turned into what's called an urban county. And so they provide municipal services. I remember as a lobbyist for the county lobbying for the ability for the county to provide cultural services, because the city was the only game in town at the time. Henderson might have had a fledgling program, and the county really wanted to have its own cultural affairs program to be able to do municipal arts and things like that. They had no statutory authority to do it. So for many, many years, the county was growing into something like a city, but stayed a county. And that creates a whole host of unique challenges and descriptors for our county, because it's urban, it's rural, and it's regional. It has three key components. And so sometimes it gets confusing for people, but it's just, we're unique here in Southern Nevada because of that development pattern that the commissioner was referring to.
So the collegiality really is critical of working together when you look at things like, I know that we do share budget, I think 60% to the county, 40% to the city, based on number of calls for security for the metro. So the issues of property tax, I think, is pretty much, and correct me because you certainly have been in government a heck of a lot longer than I, and Betsy as well, with your background and studies and everything else. But the islands pay property, well, we all know that because of the recession what happened to the property tax, but the reality is that the property tax from any homeowner or business in a county island goes to county. And for the city, comes to the city.
Right.
Are those property taxes equitable?
Well, it would depend on how
A
you
house,
define
your
that,
home.
right?
Your home, let's just, you live in the county or the city?
I actually live in North Las Vegas.
So, let's put you in one of the islands. Now, let's put us in the biggest island up there in the Northwest. The property tax as a homeowner there would go to the county. And is that equitable in the amount for that same house were it in the city?
So it would depend on how you define it, and really, that was some of the contentious conversations that we had. I mean, this goes back to Commissioner Brown at the time. It was a city councilman and
Right.
Commissioner Chip Maxfield, of them trying to plan accordingly so that you could maintain the rural lifestyle. And I can tell you that living in North Las Vegas on Lone Mountain and Decatur, we were the last area out there. But when Rancho Altamira came in, and when the subdivision across from us came in, you know, people were not so forgiving for our horses, right? Because they had flies, and why do you got to have chickens? They're loud, and peacocks, and all of those things that we moved out there first
To have,
for.
right.
And so that was really some of the contentious conversations that we had amongst us. And Commissioner Brown, Councilman Beers were definitely big supporters, and you know, having the conversation to make sure that everybody was represented in our local. So you know, the rural folks would argue that they have a half acre and an acre. Maybe they don't use the parks as much as somebody who lives in a 4,000 square foot lot. They would argue that, you know, they use the roads the same as the others. And so what we tried to do is take that out of the equation and just give this stability. What I'll tell you is amazing for the rurals is the agricultural that we have in Clark County. We're unique as a state to have agricultural in an urban part of our valley. I mean, and that benefits everybody, whether it be the kids who live in the city or North Las Vegas, going out to Gilcrease to pick apples, going to the farm to learn about, you know, cows and different things. And so we tried to weigh the quality of life as opposed to specific services, because as long as all of us work together, the constituents will thrive no matter what.
Do you sense, and again, too, having been here since the 60s with less than 100,000 people, first we lived in an apartment complex, but then we moved out to Viking Road, and I had a horse. And yet the city began to swallow up, which is part of progress, areas that once were considered very rural, very rural.
Right.
So where does that line, how do you draw that line as to what should remain the rural area and what allows for growth and development? And I know that people are very interested in this because we get a lot of push. I mean, you know, a lot of people are
Right.
very angry today about so many things. And those are the people you hear from. You don't hear
Right.
from, I'm happy as a clam in
Right.
mud. I am an angry person. So why don't you stop this growth in Las Vegas? And they don't mean Las Vegas, the city, because nobody understands that.
Right.
They mean the whole thing. So when you look at these pockets that are rural, that may be mini farms as well, how do you stop growth? Or do you just say, leave these areas alone, let growth continue? What is the philosophy, basically, that you're
So at
seeing?
least for me was preserving what we already had, because you know, we're terrible in the state as a whole about preserving history, right? We just blow it up
Absolutely.
and start over, and but there's a lot of great memories. There's a lot of, you know, with STEM education today, and I know education's super important to you. Kids are learning different things through agricultural. Kids 4-H kids live in the city and still have the opportunity to be in the county and have that experience, right? And that's where people say there's not a lot to do in Las Vegas and it's only the Strip and it's only downtown. That's not true at all. We have amazing outdoor venues that both the city and the county
Well,
share.
there used to be the 4-H Club sales right around Bob Taylor's ranch house, because I know we went out there to one of the sales back in the late 60s, and this beautiful steer, I mean, raised by this little child, all washed and clean. And I remember patting its little face, and then whoever took us out there said, you know, do you want to buy for your freezer?
Right?
I mean, I did not eat one piece of that meat. I'm not sure it was that poor little thing, but I know 4-H is it still.
It's bigger than ever that we've had it, and we've preserved it, and many city kids
Can do that.
can provide that learning experience, and they participate in the Clark County Fair, right? So
This is
everybody wins.
fascinating. Isn't that wonderful?
And it's great to know that we can have the best. Nevada is such a unique state, right? We're very small,
That's
we're
why we
very
love it.
tight-knit,
Yes.
and we can have a little bit of everything, which gives us the quality of life and preserves our history.
So you're a great salesperson. You should have been in the whatever.
I love
whatever
Nevada.
it is.
I love,
But I mean, I do remember, and I know you do too, Betsy, when I'm not sure who was first in front of city council, but advocating, keep your hands off the county island out in the Northwest, the big one in particular, but others. I think it was at that time Commissioner Collins, then Commissioner Brown. I'm not sure. There was a whole rotation of people coming up in front of the council. And I'm not sure we on the council, certainly Councilman Coffin, who's almost born and raised here, understood what the benefit would be to, what would have been the benefit to incorporate these islands if that had been a possibility, which I'm sure it wasn't. But even what would have been the benefit that we were thinking about, talking about as we pursued the perimeters of these islands, at least, that some people who really, like we did, we got tired of the septic tank and digging down further as the water table went down. And we said, we're out there on Viking, we're going to get on sewer.
I think there are a bunch of different things that contribute to this. One, the history that we talked about, that some of these islands were kind of created through development patterns, and there are some differentials in the tax rates because the county doesn't have one unified tax rate. And so that creates some dilemmas. And we had some old interlocal agreements, actually, that had never really been followed. And so there was this whole hodgepodge of things that were going on that contributed to that dialogue over the last couple of years. And one of the things that you typically do through an annexation pattern is that you're creating consistency among those variables. Consistent levels of services, consistent level of development standards, consistent level of
True.
growth and development patterns going forward.
Yes.
I mean, that is why you expand a city boundary, because a city is typically uniquely positioned to provide those services. Ordinarily, a county wouldn't. So I gave you the example of the cultural affairs thing, but
Right.
in another county, you might not have a code enforcement department. You might not have a fire department. You might not have a police department. You might have a county sheriff's department, but you wouldn't necessarily have a police department. So there are a lot of things that differentiate our unique region from other cities. And so there were some things that needed to get resolved in this area. There are some one of the things that I think Commissioner really pushed for was making sure that as we go forward, that we have density restrictions and they go both ways. So like you were saying, Mayor, how does it impact people, and how does it keep this area from changing deliberately?
Yeah.
Well, for as long as we have these interlocal agreements, people will be limited to the densities they can build. So
So what
basically
you're
it's 2 to
saying-
the acre that people will be able to build.
So basically what you're saying to the lay mind, that here we are with the county island with these larger parcels with farmettes, and around it prohibiting, who cares, a
Commercial,
high
you're not
rise.
going to have commercial, you're not going to have
density.
apartments, you're not going to have those
Right.
kinds of things because
Within how
there's
far?
a density restriction. In that map that we showed a little
Yes.
bit earlier,
Yes.
there's these big pockets of county islands, and within those, they will be residential, and they will be limited to a certain density, for the most part, 2 to the acre. So you're talking half-acre lots.
But
So
the,
it's
but the
compatible.
great thing about that is, right, we're now compatible to the folks that invested out there many years ago, and so that they can still preserve that lifestyle, because it's very hard, and I come from where we no longer have the animals, right?
Yeah.
But we do have a garden because we have a nice bigger lot and we can do different things.
See, where we have lived for 40 years used to be horse. And if you, in fact, buy one of the properties, I'm not sure it's still grandfathered in, but you're landlocked around it, so there are no trails
Right.
to ride. And I know out in your area with the 215 and what happened to Bob Taylor's
Right.
ranch house, as well as, I mean, so many other areas, that will come anyway, won't it?
Well, I mean, but you know, you guys built, the city built off of Bradley a horse arena.
Yes.
Because there was a need for it, right? People needed somewhere to go in the community that they could safely ride because things had
owns that?
changed. The city.
Us,
We do.
yes.
And is
And
there
that-
anything in there for the families that are in the island with the horses that protects that for how many years from being developed into something else?
That is.
It's all protected. And you know, one of the nice things about how the city and the county do work together is we don't check your ID on the way into a park
Right.
or to a community center or if a fire truck shows up at your place. We don't do that. That does happen in other communities, by the way. We're lucky that it doesn't happen here, I think. So we share these resources, and you know, while we've got some things that are beneficial on the east side of the freeway, the east side of 95, which benefit Commission District B, the area that the commissioner represents, Commissioner Brown in Commission District C has made major work to have the county make major investments in regional parks near and around Lone Mountain, including a new horse arena that allows people who are riding. And we work together to try and create the trail network to connect all these assets. So there are a lot of things that we actually work really well together on. And so I think those things are benefiting everybody equally.
Okay, so let me go to another point because I know, unfortunately, as in education, everything is about money. Now, when you talk about, I know, of course, the county has its own fire and rescue. We have. In these islands, you are not going to come in from the locales way out to service fire and rescue in the islands. It's only logical that we would come from the nearest station. So knowing that, and the goodwill that's there if it were in another area where county could get there. But the reality, it's a cost. So looking at that cost, does the county then reimburse for these or not, or is that part of a future? And I'm just picking on that. There may be other areas where we should be reimbursing the county. But I'm thinking in particular of our fire and rescue and where our stations are that would service those two at least that I'm thinking of.
So here's what I'll tell you. Interesting enough, last night I went to a firehouse dinner in North Las Vegas because I like to get to know all of our public safety folks. And
And they cook well. I know
Yes, it
every
was
fire
Italian. It was
person
fabulous.
has to cook for a day.
it was fabulous.
Right.
But you know, interesting enough, last night there was a call on Rome in North Las Vegas,
Yes.
Clark County, and the city. We're all, and I went on the call with them. We're all headed
Same
to
thing.
the same place until it was assessed, and then but everybody was going. There were 7 trucks that were headed
Fabulous.
to rescues, and that's really the benefit, and that's really what we should be talking about.
Right.
And we are fortunate in Clark County as a whole to have those kind of agreements. You know, Washoe was in a situation just a few years ago where the city and the county were arguing as people's houses were burning down, and that's never the position I want to be in. So it may be today that the calls may fluctuate regardless out there, but maybe on another part of town, the county can get there, and that's really
What you're
and
looking
I
at.
think that
'Cause
we
I
worked
would-
pretty hard to put that to rest and to evaluate it and to stay on top of it.
Well, and of course, today with the technology that we have, you can monitor how many calls, what they are.
Right.
Because I'm like you, and I do always look optimistically at things. And I used to, in my earlier days, play a lot of tennis. And I remember I was lamed up with something and couldn't play, and there were some big, heavy matches for lay people. And so I watched cheating Or that was what I was watching, because there was a reputation on a couple of the ladies that they were big-time cheaters. And so what happened was, after I started checking them off every time that I thought there was a violation, we got to the end of the matches that day absolutely equal. So knowing, I mean, there was as much cheating going on, and I'm not saying it for the county or the city, but the reality is the concerns, and now that we can look at data, I think that's really, really important, because you just want to make sure that the most important thing are the people that live here and keeping
Right.
them safe. That's always number one. So, and obviously, too, with us sharing, as we do, unreasonable, if in fact it became imbalanced, even with Metro, those are things as we build more in the city and build more density in the city, which we need residentially. I can see perhaps that being something. But then on the other hand, too, if city services and code enforcement and cleaning things up in county islands, so it would just be a matter of data collection. And but I don't think, maybe I was not paying attention in the La La Land, which does happen. The property taxes that one pays in the city, and you pay to North Las Vegas. Again, thank you for that. But for the county property tax and the city property tax, commercial and residential, are they pretty close to equitable or no?
Well, so here's what I just want to put out there, food for thought. So many of the county islands are agricultural in nature, so they have a completely different property
Structure.
tax than anybody else. So let's use the
Okay.
pig farm.
Yeah.
Mr. Combs
Oh, I
leaving for
love
many
him.
years. He was agricultural, so
Great
now
trip.
that's changing.
Excuse me. Everybody is watching this. Run out there before he moves that pig farm.
It's already
It is-
gone. It's already
It's
gone.
already gone?
Yeah.
Oh my
had
gosh!
to-
I used
December
to take the
31st
kids.
was
I
his last
loved
day.
it. Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, you have to weigh into that. So
That
that's
makes
why
sense.
I don't. I wouldn't know how you would evaluate that, but going back to last night, it warmed my heart as an
To see
elected
everything.
official to see a white and red truck, a red truck, and a yellow truck
Isn't
all
it
heading
really?
to one apartment complex to ensure the safety of our residents.
Wonderful.
And the beauty of the interlocal, which I think is different this time, is there's a provision in there that requires us to work together on regional parks. There's a
We need more,
we do, most definitely. There's a
and I think our council's totally behind really making sure we're doing a good job of evaluating where the next one should go and how we can work together on that.
so we're supposed to be working together. It talks about the roadways, working together in the Northwest. It's super important that we get that spaghetti bowl done out there so that people have easy access. And it also says, and we've already done it, Mr. Perigo was on here earlier, talking where we can mutually agree on what makes sense, right? So maybe there is an opportunity for somebody to change to the city at some point because they're one lone house and this has changed, but we can have those conversations, and we're already working on Ann and Rainbow Corridor, what makes sense. And that's, for the next 10 years, that's exactly where we should be.
And we should be doing that. I
encouraging our
mean, there
staff to
should
do.
be a master plan for 10, 20 years out. And, because I know there are so many parts as we're going to continue to grow here. There's no way we're not. And
for the county, we're going to continue to provide a lot of those social services issues, and it's great.
well, that's a good thing because, I mean, looking at this whole homeless issue with which we're dealing, also mental health. There's so many issues that we share because I know it was interesting that at my state of the city, after going through all the wonderful accolades of everything
it
that's
was a
happened.
great speech, by
Well,
the way.
thank you. There were 5 issues, and I was questioned about them. Well, they're not your issues. And I thought, yes, they are. Every single one of them. What's happening now with UNLV coming into town and the medical care and this reimbursement rates. I mean, our Cleveland Clinic, Lou Ruvo Institute for Brain Health isn't growing because Medicaid is lower in Nevada than it is in the surrounding states, forget California. But every one of those issues, the homeless situation. And so I know you and I have chatted about a property on the south side of the 15.
yeah.
But with all of the different pieces, every single one of them touches the county as much as it does to the city. And so my hope is, and I want to ask, because I know we're running out of time, it went so quickly, tell us a little bit about this interlocal and the resolve and where we're headed. So Betsy first, and of course, Commissioner, please.
Well, I think, one, it's done, which is great. And
Done
so-
and registered and locked in for
Yep,
how many
yes,
years?
pretty much 10.
Okay.
And so all the detail work is done. We've got the maps finished.
Does this whole thing come back in front of the county, or is and
No, it's complete.
It's
we
done,
we were
okay.
we had to wait on a few technical things to
Okay.
get worked out. That's complete now. In fact, we were just talking about this a couple of
Uh-huh.
weeks ago. So that's taken care of, and so we're moving forward. Now we're on to bigger and better things, I think. Things like trying to work out this regional park plan for the Northwest
Good.
so that we can make the most effective use of the tax dollars that we do have available for investments in parks. So we'll be working on those things. The city will continue to annex undeveloped land in the area so that we can be prepared for growth and development in the Northwest and around that area. So I think we've kind of smoothed out most of those rough edges, and now we're able to focus on, the next higher order of things we need to be providing to the residents in the area.
One of the things I want to ask is, because we are really running out of time, going up into Mount Charleston, Kyle Canyon. I mean, that is become just the hairiest eyeball I've ever seen. And people, it's overcrowded up there, but the roadways really aren't. Now, is that collaboratively, or is that now going to pull in NDOT as well?
So
in
I
this
will
effort to
tell you
fix
that NDOT is part of the discussion, the county is part of the discussion, and of course residents, whether they be city, people from all over use that. So there's a big play area that's been planned up there for a very long time. The fire department is up and running now, because you remember that when I was at the state, we give it back to the
Yes,
county.
thank you.
Said you're responsible.
Good.
So there's a lot of moving pieces, but so I know Commissioner Brown has worked very hard on putting some safe environment up there so for folks to go
Well,
play.
the roadway needs a lot of help, and it's so very dangerous. A friend of mine was killed several years back, but the same issue is still in existence. So unfortunately, we're out of time. We could go on and on. We've only touched the surface. But I want to thank you so much for being here, both of you, and thank you at home for watching. We're going to see you next time for another episode of Hello, Mayor. So I hope you have a great day. And remember, Commissioner Marilyn Kirkpatrick and Betsy Fretwell, our city manager. Thanks.